Okay, we're back for part two of our conversation with Gisèle Huff, author of her memoir called Force of Nature, appropriately. We were finishing up part one by talking about her move to the West Coast, to San Francisco. And we'll pick up right there. Gisèle, you went west as a young lady, and I don't want to fill in too many dots again, but you ran for Congress.
Yes. In the meantime, I just need to add here that my husband passed away of pancreatic cancer when he was 54. And after that, I remarried and retired from my job as the director of development at a private high school. And I was very bored, and I was moved to Marin, and I realized that I was represented by Lynn Woolsey, who I felt was much dumber than I am. And, Plato says, you can't be represented or governed by people who are dumber than you. So I decided to run for Congress, just like that. And I was defeated in the primary. And of course, I was very raring to go, even though I was 62 at the time. And I contacted someone you probably know, and now I'm having a senior moment, the woman who runs the Pacific Research Institute.
Sally Pipes, I think.
Correct.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep.
Sally Pipes. And I said, I'd like a job because I'm, and she said, oh, please, no, you're overqualified. But your friend, Jerry Hume, is looking for an executive director for the Jacqueline Hume Foundation. So I called Jerry and I said, Jerry, here I am. And he said, Gisèle, we're doing a national search. So long story short, I was hired. And I became the executive director of the Jacqueline Hume Foundation, where I worked for 22 years.
Just quickly then, who was Jacqueline Hume?
Jack Hume was, he and his brother started a business just before the Second World War, dehydrating potatoes and making them so that you could make mashed potatoes by just adding water.
Yeah.
And that's all she wrote,
Yeah.
and the war came, and he and his brother, they started, the company is called Basic American Foods. It's a privately held company that's still in existence. And when he retired, he had started a foundation. He ran it, and when he died, his sons took over, and they hired a gatekeeper who didn't know anything about public policy, but just got, and they got tired of sitting for 1 week solid, having presentations from people who, submitted a proposal. That can't do that. I mean, they had a business to run in addition to that.
Yeah.
But just, mind blown. Can you imagine getting presentations for a period of a week, one after the other? How could you even make a decision? Yeah. Anyway, they hired me because I had, the policy background, and we decided to concentrate on K-12 education. And that's when we met. Yeah. Because the foundation was conservative in ideology, and the idea was to make it possible for people who don't have choice, by giving them vouchers, to make choices for their children's education. And so we worked on this for 10 years, got very involved with the state-based free market think tanks, because they were the ones who were formulating the sort of the laws to establish things like charter schools and tax credits and vouchers. And I was doing this until I got very frustrated, because it was glacially slow. I mean, the math didn't work. We could be doing this for 100 years and we still wouldn't have made a dent in, what was happening to children every day in America. And I met Clayton Christensen, the Harvard professor who coined disruptive innovation. And he applied that lens to education in a book that I actually had it was because of me that he wrote that book. he sent me a précis of the book he was going to write. And I said, no, you can't write that book. No, that book is no good because you have an opening chapter and then it's just a bunch of people who don't know anything about disruptive innovation who are going to sort of fit it into what they have in mind. I said, it's not going to convince anybody. A compendium just gathers dust. So he listened to me and he wrote Disrupting Class, which was a seminal book about the introduction of technology into, as an integral part of the curriculum, not as a tool that sits in the back and collects dust. So from that time on, I shifted gears.
Are you more
Gisèle,
Go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to ask along those lines. Sorry to interrupt there, Mike. You just sort of ended, or at least as you talked through your 22 years there, with sort of your disappointment with education reform in some respects. But looking back on it now, since there again is a sort of there's some enzymes in the air, if you will, on the issue of K-12 education and talk about reform and parent involvement. Is there anything along that path, as you say, many things didn't work out as you sort of contemplated them and thought of ways of addressing, as you just now mentioned, technology? Are there some things you did note that maybe are coming to mind a little bit now, sort of watching this conversation, public discussion and debate go on over K-12 and what's being taught in class, how schools are organized? Could you share any reflections where you thought maybe there is something here, it's not working out as I see it now, or then, as I should say, as you were coming to the close at Hume, but now you say, well, maybe there were some good marks in the sand that were made?
No. So it's not about governance or even content of curriculum. It's about the purpose of education. And the purpose of education in the 21st century is not the transfer of knowledge. The transfer of knowledge is in that little thing that I carry in my purse that has more knowledge in it than all of the teachers in America put together, where I can learn anything I want. If I want to learn something, I've got Khan Academy, I can earn degrees, I can learn anything I want on that little box. I don't care what the governance mechanisms or even the content. There has to be a complete transformation of education. Parents don't understand that yet because they are stuck in the paradigm that they went through. I mean, when we began to introduce the concept into schools, I remember meeting with groups of superintendents, some of whom were from very well-educated districts, where the parents said, no, don't change the rules. I got to Harvard this way. I want my kid to get to Harvard this way. Right?
Yeah.
Not taking into account that Harvard isn't going to be like that anymore either. Yeah. Because the 21st century's challenges are entirely different than their century's challenge or even early 20th century challenges. So no, the answer to your question, none of these things that are involved in reform, these ridiculous arguments that we're having about, about critical, I can't even say the words. It's so ridiculous when what we're facing is that we're not equipping our children, first of all, to compete with China, because China has one curriculum, a national curriculum, and Alabama, Idaho, California, New York, they can't compete with China. That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah. I take it, Gisèle, you have an opinion about whether philanthropy, conservative or otherwise, understands the need for transformation. That's a softball for Gisèle.
A softball.
But what how bad is the understanding of the need for this transformation to which you make reference on the part of philanthropy?
So philanthropy, which is the ability to take lots of money out of the circulation of the economy and shelter it from taxes and then spend it any old way you want, with a requirement that you spend 5% of the the corpus yearly. But the 5% includes expenses. So it could include, you know, a retreat for the staff to Cabo San Luca, maybe 2, maybe 3, right? It could mean building what Gates has built, an entire complex of buildings. That's all included in the 5%. There's nothing about the 5% that says that you have to spend it on actual philanthropic activities, right? Building buildings is not a philanthropic activity. In addition to that, the idea, it's like, you know, the states are the place where all the experiments in democracy will happen. No, they're not the case. This is not true. It's a lie. The same way, I mean, foundations are supposed to use this money for good purposes, for the common weal. That's why they're being excused from not participating monetarily in the economy, right? And protecting that money for their well. They don't do anything innovative, ever. Ever. They're supposed to be VCs, right? You can't imagine how many times I pleaded with my colleagues when I used to go to a lot of conferences, and I'm not a shrinking violet, as you might tell, and I would scream at them, essentially, in a ladylike way. Okay, give away, you know, 95% of what you give away to the things that already exist, trying to reform them or make them a little bit better. But spend 5% on spaghettis at the wall. Throw it the way a VC will do, and you get some winners, you get a lot of losers, but the winners will be spectacular, just like what happens with VCs. No, and I was never able to convince them to do that.
Yeah.
So 2 things. One, we have to make the payout 10% without expenses being allowed. 10% of that. For in general. This is an aside, this isn't the second thing. The foundation should sunset. There's no reason why they should go on in perpetuity, because Ford is twisting slowly in his grave when he's seeing what the Ford Foundation is doing. I mean, there's just, and it's all, it's not, you know. So for sure 10%, and then they should be spending VC money. They should be looking for fantastic things that people are coming up with, and they're strangled because they have to make payroll in January. And they have to spend 40% of their time raising money. It's outrageous. That's, you know, nonprofits are a huge part of our country. We are one of the most generous countries in the world when it comes to that. But we are hamstringing these poor people. I mean, I served on the boards of over time of 6 of our grantees. So I knew firsthand how difficult it was for these people to raise the money.
Yeah.
It's outrageous.
Tell us about UBI and whether it's a natural follow-on to your work on education reform, or a pivot, or, you know, where does your interest in that issue come from, and then what's to be done in furtherance of it? So
the core of the transformation of education is competency-based learning, where the child, with the use of technology, the parents, the teacher, the administrators, all can tell how the child is doing all along. And if the child is missing something, then an intervention can be brought Tuesday at 1 o'clock, not 3 months later when he fails the test. Okay, so competency-based learning is a learner-centered. It gives power to the learner. In the same way, UBI gives power to the citizen, to the person who is contributing to the economy, which is a circular thing, right? If you eliminate all the jobs with automation, robots don't pay taxes, robots don't shop. That's the end of the economic system that we live under. I mean, we have to be able to allow the circulation of money to continue, even as jobs are being eliminated. And the answer to that is universal basic income, where every person in the country gets a certain amount from the age of 18 on, whatever, 21, whether that's a decision to be made, and gets it for the rest of their lives and know that they're getting it, right? So they can plan on it. They can decide their life's path about it. They can find a job or change jobs or take off for 3 months and make guitars or whatever. So part of our motto, part of the, what we believe in America is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, that last one is not working.
Mhm.
Even rich people aren't happy. Look at the suicide rate. Look at the life expectancy is going down in this country.
How much is my basic income under the Gisèle?
Well, the number is $1,000 a month.
Yeah.
So that's $12,000 a year, but $1,000 a month per person, not households.
Yeah.
So already two people or two married people or two people live together have $2,000. And if you don't lose it, no matter what you earn, now it gets clawed back all the way down, at a certain point, 100,000 or whatever, you don't get it anymore, you pay tax on it. So it gets clawed back, it doesn't become part of your income.
Mhm.
So everybody gets it, and that's the beauty of it. That's the sort of philosophical strength of this idea. Everyone is the same in the eyes of the consumer society, which is the system we have. It's essentially saving capitalism. Because
Mhm.
capitalism depends on the flow, the circulation of money. And when you look at the profits that are being posted this week by the huge corporations that are out of, control, while inflation is raging and people can't buy a dozen eggs, something is wrong with that picture. It's an untenable situation.
Yeah. You have any conservative philanthropic allies from your education reform days with you on the UBI issue?
Well, Jeb Bush, he wrote a blurb from my book, and he and I had many discussions about UBI. Milton Friedman, who I knew very well and had many discussions with him as well, was a believer in UBI. Charles Murray is a believer in UBI. Of course, he sees it as a replacement of the welfare state, but that doesn't quite work out right. I mean, it shouldn't be seen that way. It has to be seen in its own way. And I have to say that, the fact that I started the fund, first of all, it's named for my late son, who by the most, Greek tragedy fold in my life, also died of pancreatic cancer, also at the age of 54, just like his father. So he was a huge proponent. He was a principal software engineer at Tesla. He was responsible for the cloud connection to the Model 3, which was the first model that really got out off the production line. And he knew that technological unemployment was going to hit us hard, and he was a proponent of UBI from way back. And he convinced me that that was the way to go. So when he passed away and I retired and I was looking at the rest of my life, I thought, I'm going to pick up the baton.
Okay.
And that's what I did.
Well, Force of Nature, Gisèle Huff, author of her memoir entitled Force of Nature. thanks so much for taking the time to talk to
Oh,
Dan.
please, thank you
Great.
so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks.